The Asphalt Art program is administered by FC Moves, the Transportation Planning Department of the City of Fort Collins. The Paint Pot program is a grant-funded asphalt art project made possible through a grant from the National Association of City Transportation Officials. With special thanks to Bike Fort Collins and Jillian Betterly for programmatic support. This storytelling project is a collection of voices from the neighborhoods where the asphalt murals were painted. Several of the voices are Indigenous, Hispanic, and Latino community members with long generational ties to the neighborhoods called Tres Colonias, or the Spanish colonies. This episode features Luis Santa Cruz, the artist of the murals on Romero Street and Hickory Street, Somos Fort Collins, and Mi Frida Linda.
So my name is Luis Santa Cruz, and I am the artist for the Romero mural. I'm designing and kind of directing, helping people out wherever they need help. It started with my professor, Aitor Lajerin. He actually worked on the last mural with Ana, and Ana contacted him just because Ana was looking for somebody who would connect to the neighborhood culturally and who's also an artist, so kind of wanted those two. So that's when she reached out to Aitor, my professor, and that's when he kind of referenced me, and then I got in contact with Ana, and that's basically how it started. We met up a few times. The first few times we met up at the neighborhood just to try to like get to know the people around the neighborhood, so that we can kind of like incorporate their ideas or what they want, their history. This neighborhood specifically is very rich in history, especially the Mexican history, the Hispanic history in Fort Collins. So I think it was important to kind of incorporate that into the mural, and that's where I'm here. So I'm Mexican, and I migrated here when I was 4. So I am part of more of like the immigrant community, which is more prominent in the next mural, but this one, the families here have been here for like years and generations. So there's a little bit of difference there, but we kind of still connected in that like Latinidad, where we're both, we're both Mexican and can understand each other in that cultural level. So that's where I was involved in it to begin with. I graduated last year, spring. I graduated with a BFA, so Bachelor's in Fine Art, concentration in painting. And I've just been taking a little break before going into grad school, but I plan to continue grad school to study painting and hopefully teach at a university level while at the same time working on my art. When my family and I migrated here, my dad brought us to Loveland. So that's where I was raised, in Loveland. As far as going to Fort Collins in the school, I'm undocumented. I'm DACA. So I had to really look up what schools were going to be easier for me to attend or which ones are going to have resources for me. And CSU is actually really good about kind of having programs set in place for undocumented students, because we can't really apply for like FAFSA, and we typically come from like the poor end of like the class. They have like a kind of like a FAFSA that we can apply to that kind of takes place of the actual FAFSA, and so they've helped a lot. That's what attracted me to them, CSU. They've worked with a lot of undocumented students, and they have programs set in that. And then as well as my first year, I studied landscape architecture. So I studied that the first year, and they have a decent landscape architecture program. And then after that, I switched into art, which they have a really great art program too, though. For the mural, first I had to take several things into like bringing it together, and that's one, the fact that it's a community-based mural. It's not just my art. If it was my art, it would look very different, but this is something that we have to work with the community. Children are going to be coming, people who have never painted, so I have to make it simple enough and to where people can work on it as a community. That's where the simplicity came from, as well as like bright colors. I wanted to incorporate that. so it can pop. It's also a part of the reason we had the mural was just as a safety reason. A lot of cars will go fast through here, and something like this has shown to like slow cars down if they kind of see something like this. And they're more aware of like their surroundings when they have like paint in the streets. So that was another part of it. Again, connecting with the cultural part, we met up with the community members, so like the people around the neighborhood, and we just had conversations with them. We asked, what are you guys looking for? What matters? What are the things that you want to see? And I obviously couldn't incorporate everything because I had to simplify it and kind of make sure it was incorporated into like this neighborhood. And of course the city of Fort Collins has a lot of rules against what you're allowed to put on like the floor, or I guess anywhere visually. So I had to work around all those obstacles, but just because I am a visual person, I did have a rendition where I did have words, but I think they didn't want any words either. But yeah, that's basically how it was conceptualized. It was a community effort, so I kind of listened to the neighborhood, what they had to say, as well as just like bringing in my part of like my artistic side and figuring out how I'm gonna make bring in that cultural part, the neighborhoods, like what they want, as well as making it simple and achievable to finish in a day. Yeah. It was actually pretty interesting to talk with the community members because I learned a lot about like the history. And in school, I went to school in Loveland, and like it's just something we don't learn about. You learn about like the basic few people in history that we all kind of tend to learn about, but we don't learn about the history that's around us, or Hispanic history, or any of that kind of diverse history. So it's we look at, I think a lot of us kind of look at history through a very distinct perspective, and looking at it through the neighborhood's point of view and kind of being part of this community for a while, it was really interesting to learn that side of the history of Fort Collins. And a lot of their stories, I was very surprised that some families had been here for 4 or 5 generations, and like their great grandma lived down the street. And I come from an immigrant community where everybody is coming from another country, and like this is new to us. And so finding a place where the space really kind of belongs to the community, and them being like a Hispanic community, and it's really awesome to kind of learn about that and see that side, and that the city is actually doing something to enrich it and focus on it. So yeah, that's mostly like their stories that I kind of took on, were their stories about like their grandparents who were farmers, who would work just like on that field when there was a sugar beet field over there, obviously. But yeah, their like great grandpa would work over there, come back here to the house that they were given. So yeah, I learned a lot of interesting stories. I remember I kind of started to connect it with some of the things I learned at CSU, where I took some like Hispanic history classes. And I remember one day we learned about Fort Collins specifically, and how that worked. And basically the north side of the tracks. So I don't know if you know the tracks down there. So the north side was where like all the Hispanics were, and the other side were like whites, right? And even though it wasn't like a set rule, after dark, you stayed on your side, and they stayed on their side, and it was very dangerous if you like crossed. And there's like a lot of that kind of history that we just don't learn, or I feel like a lot of places like to like brush, like let's not talk about that or consider that happened, And it is awkward. It's an awkward history, but it's their history, and it's supposed to be represented just as much as like any other history, maybe even more so, considering they were such a big part of like boosting the economy in Fort Collins. Like the Hispanics really were a big pillar in forming what we know as Fort Collins today, and I think that's not recognized enough. So I think bringing their stories into it, and like the short hoe for the Mexicans, so that's why I incorporated the short hoe into the mural. Mexicans were given the short hoe, while like the German immigrants were given the long hoe, so they don't have to work on their backs as much. Keeping those little elements of history and making sure that we let people or like educate people like know that this happened and this is a history of that, I think is important in this mural especially. It's a mirrored image, so if you cut it in half, one side is basically the mirrored side. So it's a mirrored image. There are two giant sugar beets to incorporate the agricultural history with the sugar beets. So the two sugar beets are kind of connecting in the middle with it's a foco rico dress. So it's the very traditional Mexican dresses that come in all colors. And so I wanted to incorporate that dress in the middle to kind of like, emphasize our Latin culture and like the fun, colorful and like fluid dancing part of it that like we like to celebrate. I thought that was a really great incorporation in the middle part. We go out to the big giant sugar beets, and then around them are all the kind of short hose that were used to dig up those sugar beets. And then I kind of added little circles that make it look like they're zooming in, so you can kind of like see it through a different lens. But that's pretty much it. It's the big two sugar beets, a big foco rico dress in the middle, little small short hose around, and then colorful leaves on either end to kind of wrap up the mural. As far as my art and how this has affected it, I don't think it has. I think my brain kind of just switched to like, this is the way we have to do it. But when I do my artwork, I work in oil paints mainly on wood board, with like regular sized canvases. So, completely different in terms of media size, style. I mean, just everything. So I think I just had to kind of turn my brain off of that like artistic mode. If I was able to do like a mural on my own, then, then I would apply that. But this was such a, like you said, a specific type of event where there needed to be a lot of considerations. So, I think I just kind of switched my brain into that mode, and I think that's, for me, it's pretty easy. I don't think this affected how I work on my artwork, but all my artwork has to do with my culture, with my story, so this kind of fit into that theme. So in terms of theme, it is the same as my artwork. I do like to incorporate those themes, but as far as like style and everything else, that goes around that, it was different, and I had to work around those challenges, but it wasn't as hard as I initially thought it was going to be. It was surprisingly worked out well. I think especially because it was a community event and a lot of people showed up, and last year I didn't expect for so many people to show up, so it was really great to have all that help. I feel like last year I barely did any of the painting because I was like going over here to help people out, and that was a really awesome thing to do too. This has enriched like my idea of what art can do and what it can do to a community and to like a specific group of people that have been marginalized. Since I work around that, I think it has informed my art in that sense. So I think this kind of reinforces my idea of the power of art and like how strong it is in bringing people together, sharing a story, sharing history, bringing people together, which I feel like nowadays is it's important because we are so kind of distant from each other, so I like it because it just, reassured me of the power of art and how good art can be to like a community and to humanity in general. So I just want people to know that we didn't just get to this. I think there had to be a big process for us to get to a point where we are celebrating our culture and having it be part of our city's culture, and kind of starting to realize that Hispanic people are part of this city, and we're a pillar in its history and its formation. So I think things like this, I want them to know that we didn't just get here. There was a process. There was a lot of people who had to fight to get here. We have a lot of people in the community now who are fighting to continue to, spread the awareness and history of our culture here. We are here, and this is awesome, but it was definitely a journey, and it wasn't easy for a lot of people.